Picture yourself walking into a cold home where warmth came from creativity, not technology. Our grandparents survived harsh winters, not with modern heating, but with clever tricks like quilts, heated rocks, and animal furs. Here are 12 bizarre but real ways they braved the cold before central heating was even a thought. They piled heavy quilts and bed curtains around sleeping spaces to trap body heat. Back in the day, winter nights could be bitterly cold, and many families lacked the luxury of central heating. So our grandparents got resourceful. The thick, layered fabric acted like a giant insulation blanket, creating a warmer microclimate inside the bed and keeping the freezing air out. Quilts, often made from wool or cotton, were heavier and more effective than anything you would find in a modern home. Bed curtains were hung around the sleeping space to seal in warmth and block out cold drafts, creeping in through gaps in windows or walls. These curtains, often heavy and lined with fabrics like flannel or wool, worked as an extra layer of protection. And because they were hung around the bed, they acted like a personal little cocoon. You were not just bundled under blankets. You were enveloped in warmth from all sides. On the coldest nights, they would use woolen throws or extra blankets to cover the floor around their beds, ensuring that the cold did not rise up from the ground. Imagine the intense coziness of it all. This was not just survival. It was a kind of winter magic, born from practicality. Even without central heating, our grandparents made do, showing that a little creativity and layering could make even the coldest winter nights bearable. They used heated soapstones or rocks placed under blankets or in wagons to keep feet and beds warm. Before electric blankets or microwavable heat pads, our grandparents had to get creative when it came to warming up their beds. One clever method was heating soapstones or other stones, then tucking them under the blankets, at the foot of the bed, or between layers of bedding. Soapstones were especially useful because they absorb and hold heat for a long time. People heated the stones on the stove or in the fire, wrapped them in cloth, and set them in beds so the heat could gently radiate through the coldest nights. For cold journeys, heated rocks were placed under seats or blankets in wagons and sleighs to keep travelers warm. If soapstone was not available, river stones and other heat-retaining rocks worked well. The stones radiated warmth for hours, spreading heat without the need to tend the fire all night. That saved firewood, which mattered where wood was limited or where stoking the fire overnight was impractical. It is a simple, effective example of how people adapted to survive the winter chill without modern technology. They employed bed warmers, copper pans with hot coals or rocks slid between sheets prior to bedtime. On the coldest nights, no one wanted to crawl into a freezing bed, so our grandparents used another clever tactic to ensure they stayed warm: the bed warmer. These were copper pans or metal trays that were filled with hot coals or heated rocks and slid under the covers before bedtime. Imagine it was like having your very own personal heating system. The metal pans, heated by placing them in the fire or stove for a few minutes, would then release heat gradually throughout the night. To use them, they would place the heated bed warmer under the blankets just before slipping into bed, and the warmth would help preheat the sheets, making it more bearable to get into bed. Sometimes the pans were designed with long handles, so people could easily slide them under the covers without burning themselves. If hot coals were not available, grandparents would sometimes use bricks or stones, heating them over the fire, and then placing them in the pan. These bed warmers were an essential winter item, especially on those extra frigid nights. It is a perfect example of ingenuity, using what you had to create warmth where it was most needed. Without them, bedtime would have been a lot less comfortable for people living in homes with little insulation or heating. They built snowbanks against cabin walls for insulation, literally using snow to block wind and retain heat. When the snow started falling, our grandparents did not just let it pile up around their homes. They used it to their advantage. One of the most effective ways they kept their homes warm during the harshest winters was by building snowbanks against their cabin walls. Snow is a great insulator. It traps air in its tiny flakes, and air is a good insulator because it does not conduct heat easily. By piling snow around the cabin exterior, they created a thick layer that blocked out wind and cold, while helping to keep warmth inside. The snow walls also acted as a buffer against freezing temperatures and kept heat from escaping. This was particularly important for log cabins, which often had gaps between the logs or around windows where cold air could seep in. Adding snowbanks around the outside of the home effectively sealed out the worst of the winter chill. This technique was not just about keeping the heat inside, it was also about preventing drafts and minimizing the effort needed to keep the fire burning. It was a brilliant, low-cost method of keeping homes warm during some of the coldest, snowiest winters. It is a testament to the resourcefulness and knowledge our grandparents had for working with nature, using one of its most abundant elements to survive the bitter cold. They all slept together in one bed, sharing body heat during deep cold spells to keep warm. The practice relied on shared warmth. When temperatures dipped to dangerously low levels, keeping warm was not just about wrapping up in blankets. For many families, especially before efficient heating, the best way to survive the cold was by bundling up together. Sleeping in one bed was not just a space-saving solution, it was a survival strategy. In rural areas with drafty homes, whole families often shared a single bed. The warmth from multiple bodies under one blanket could mean the difference between freezing and staying warm through the night. Children and adults huddled together, and the body heat they produced kept everyone comfortable, even on the coldest nights. In a time when firewood was precious, this method also helped conserve heat and fuel. The shared warmth was not just physical comfort, it brought families closer together, literally and figuratively, as they endured harsh winters side by side. While modern homes with central heating have made this practice mostly obsolete, it was a staple for survival, one of many clever ways our grandparents faced winter head-on. They wore many layers of clothing and caps at night, even while sleeping, because heat loss through the head was common. When it came to staying warm in the winter, our grandparents knew that every little bit helped. One thing they absolutely did not overlook was how much heat could be lost through the head. This was not just a theory, it was a fact learned through experience. To stay warm at night, they would layer themselves in multiple pieces of clothing, shirts, sweaters, and pants, often wearing a cap or hat even while sleeping. The layers acted as insulation, trapping warm air close to the body. The reason for the cap was simple. The head is a major source of heat loss. Without a hat or cap, the body loses a significant amount of heat through the scalp. So to prevent that, our grandparents would wear woolen or knitted caps, even to bed. These multiple layers created an air pocket between the fabric and the skin, and that air trapped warmth, helping to maintain a more consistent body temperature throughout the night. This practice did not just apply to the night either. During the day, wearing layers was the preferred strategy, particularly when working or playing outside in the snow. It was not about fashion, it was about function. Wearing these layers kept them warm without needing to rely heavily on external sources of heat, which were scarce and expensive during those cold winters. They used foot warmers, small boxes with heated rocks placed at the feet under blankets. Feet are notoriously slow to warm up, especially when it's freezing outside. That is why our grandparents came up with clever ways to keep their feet toasty in the cold. One of their best tricks was using foot warmers, small portable devices designed to give warmth where it was most needed. These foot warmers were simple yet effective. A small box would be filled with heated rocks or coals, wrapped in cloth or fabric to prevent direct contact with the skin, and placed at the foot of the bed or tucked under blankets. The heat from the rocks would radiate upwards, keeping the feet warm for hours. This targeted warmth allowed people to sleep without stoking the fire all night. These foot warmers worked much like the heated stones or soapstones used elsewhere in the home. They absorbed heat, then released it slowly throughout the night. It was a more efficient way to stay warm without the need to stoke a fire constantly. While foot warmers may seem antiquated today, they were essential for getting through those frigid nights when cold air would creep in from all sides. Whether in a drafty cabin or a makeshift home, they provided targeted warmth and were among the most valued tools in winter survival. Our grandparents used thick, heavy curtains and wall hangings to block drafts and insulate rooms. Drafty windows and walls made winter nights unbearable in many homes, especially before the days of double-glazed windows and modern insulation. To keep the cold out, grandparents used one of the simplest, most effective strategies: hanging heavy curtains and wall hangings. These were often made of thick fabrics like wool, felt, or heavy cotton that could block the wind and keep rooms warmer. They weren't just decorative. They served as critical barriers against the cold, acting like an extra layer of insulation. Curtains would be drawn tightly at night, not only over windows, but sometimes across doors, to trap warmth inside. In poorly insulated homes, walls were particularly vulnerable to drafts, so blankets or large rugs were hung on walls to create an extra layer between the outside air and the living space. Those wall hangings worked by trapping air between the fabric and the wall, creating an insulating pocket that helped keep the warmth in. It wasn't uncommon for families to sleep in smaller rooms that had been effectively sealed off with heavy fabrics, ensuring that the limited heat from the stove or fire would stay in one place. By using these creative techniques, grandparents were able to minimize heat loss and stay much warmer in their homes. It is a testament to how resourceful they were when it came to making the most of what they had to survive the harshest winters. They sometimes slept later or stayed in bed longer during blizzards because getting out meant exposure. When the snow piled up and the wind howled, it was not just uncomfortable to venture outside, it was dangerous. Our grandparents knew that in extreme weather, survival meant hunkering down and staying warm for as long as possible. During blizzards, many would stay in bed longer or sleep in late, not because they wanted to be lazy, but because leaving the warmth of the blankets meant exposing themselves to the bone-chilling cold. Staying in bed was not just a matter of comfort, it was a means of survival. The body naturally uses energy to keep warm, and during blizzards, that energy was better conserved under thick blankets than out in the freezing cold. If they had the luxury of staying put, they did. This was especially true for those in rural areas, where travel could be hazardous and where the prospect of finding shelter from a blizzard was uncertain. Not only did staying in bed keep people warmer, it also meant avoiding unnecessary risk. Many families would stay inside for entire days during storms, reading, playing games, and huddling around the fireplace until the storm passed. It was not about being idle. It was about making sure everyone remained safe and warm during the worst of the winter weather. Our grandparents banked snow, used earthen insulation, and sometimes built partially underground houses to stay warm. They were experts at using the natural environment, and one of the most innovative tricks was packing snow against the outside walls. Snow, although cold itself, becomes an excellent insulator when packed because it traps air and creates a barrier against the wind. During brutal winters, people would pile snow around exterior walls, creating a natural insulation layer that helped log cabins or stone houses retain heat. In addition to snow, families dug into the earth or built partially underground homes, where the ground provided steady temperature and extra warmth. These earth homes stayed cooler in summer and toasty in winter, since the soil buffers sudden temperature changes and blocks the worst of the wind. The combination of snowbanking and earthen insulation was a clever way to maximize heat without using more fuel. Our grandparents made the most of what nature offered to create a warm, safe haven from the cold. They used prepared animal furs and heavier bedding fabrics made from wool and multiple blankets to retain heat. When it came to staying warm in winter, our grandparents knew that what you used to cover yourself could make all the difference. They didn't just rely on cotton sheets and lightweight comforters. No, they used the materials that nature had provided. For warmth, animal furs were one of their best tools. These furs were often sourced from animals they had hunted, and they were not just used for clothing, they were incorporated into bedding. Fur is a natural insulator, trapping warmth and keeping cold at bay. Whether the thick pelt came from rabbit, fox, or sheep, these pelts added an extra layer of warmth when laid over blankets or used as a mattress cover. But animal fur wasn't the only material used. Wool was another go-to fabric. Wool blankets, being thick and highly insulating, were a staple in most homes. Multiple wool blankets were often stacked on top of each other for maximum warmth, as wool's unique fibers trap air and keep heat close to the body. Many families even created quilts and heavy coverlets using wool and fur scraps for extra warmth. These natural materials, combined with old-fashioned methods of layering, helped create a snug, warm environment, even in the coldest of homes. Whether it was fur, wool, or multiple blankets, they knew that natural materials were the key to surviving the cold. They limited room usage, staying in smaller rooms, around fireplaces, and closing off unused rooms to conserve heat. Before central heating, people could not afford to heat every room in the house. Instead, our grandparents became masters of conserving heat by focusing on smaller, more easily heated spaces. On the coldest days, families would gather in one or two rooms near the fireplace or stove, shutting off the rest of the house. By keeping doors closed and using draft stoppers, they were able to maintain a warmer temperature in the rooms they were using. This not only kept the family comfortable, but it also made it easier to keep the fire burning in just one place, rather than trying to heat every room with a limited amount of fuel. It was a clever and practical way to make the most out of their resources. Fireplaces, wood stoves, and even coal-burning stoves became central gathering points where the warmth would radiate into the room. Everyone would huddle together, sometimes using quilts or blankets to make the space even cozier. It was not about luxury. It was about staying warm and getting through the winter. This method of limited space heating became a key way to make a home feel as warm as possible. And it is one of the many ways our grandparents dealt with the cold in a world without modern heating systems. There you have it, 12 ingenious, old-school tactics your grandparents used to laugh in the face of frosty winters. Which one surprised you most? Comment below and share your family's own cold weather survival trick. And hey, if you enjoyed discovering these nuggets of history, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive into forgotten ways our ancestors lived. Stay warm and keep the past alive.